Blake Kingsley walked along the deserted Hamptons shoreline, his expensive leather shoes dangling from his fingertips. The cool evening breeze ruffled his dark hair as the sun began its descent into the Atlantic. As the heir to the Kingsley Investment Group, one of the most influential financial empires on Wall Street, he had everything money could buy, yet his heart felt emptier than ever. 6 years had passed since he'd lost Olivia Reed, the only woman he had ever truly loved. 6 years since his family had torn them apart, convinced she wasn't appropriate for someone of his status. 6 years of meaningless relationships and hollow success. The waves crashed rhythmically against the sand, matching the heaviness in his chest. The Hamptons beach house had been his sanctuary since childhood, but even here, memories haunted him. It was on this very beach where he had first met Olivia, a talented art student, working as a waitress at the local marina during summer break. Despite their different backgrounds, their connection had been immediate and profound. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a desperate cry cutting through the twilight air. Blake's head snapped up, eyes scanning the churning water. About 50 yards offshore, small arms flailed against the powerful current. A child. Without hesitation, Blake dropped his jacket onto the sand and plunged into the cold water. The undertow was stronger than expected, pulling at his limbs as he fought his way toward the struggling figure. Years of competitive swimming at Yale had prepared him for this moment, his powerful strokes cutting through the waves with determined precision. "Hold on!" he shouted, pushing forward with renewed strength when he saw the child beginning to sink beneath the surface. Blake reached the boy just as he disappeared under the water. Diving down, he wrapped an arm around the small frame and kicked hard toward the surface. The child was limp in his arms as Blake turned toward shore, fighting the current with every ounce of strength he possessed. When they finally reached the shallows, Blake staggered onto the beach, carefully laying the boy on the sand. He was young, perhaps 5 or 6, with dark hair plastered to his pale face. "Come on, kid," Blake urged, checking for signs of breathing. After a tense moment, the child coughed violently, water spilling from his mouth as his eyes fluttered open. Blake froze. Those eyes, light brown with flecks of gold around the pupils. Exactly like his own. The strange sense of recognition was interrupted by the sound of frantic footsteps on the sand. A woman ran toward them, her face a mask of panic and fear. "Noah! Oh my God, Noah!" Blake knew that voice. He would have recognized it anywhere, despite the years that had passed. Olivia Reed fell to her knees beside the child, gathering him into her arms with trembling hands. "Baby, are you okay? You scared me so much." Tears streamed down her face as she pressed the boy to her chest, her fingers running through his wet hair. Blake stared at her, unable to form words. She was more beautiful than he remembered, her honey blonde hair now cut to her shoulders, her face more mature but still youthful. She wore simple jeans and a white blouse, both now partially soaked from embracing the wet child. Then his gaze returned to the boy, Noah, taking in every detail of his face. The strong jawline already visible despite his youth, the slight cleft in his chin. Just like Blake's father, just like Blake himself. A chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes ran down his spine. "Is he your son?" The question came out rougher than he intended, his voice strained. Olivia's head snapped up, truly seeing Blake for the first time. Her green eyes widened in shock, then quickly narrowed with an emotion Blake couldn't quite place. Fear, anger, something else entirely. Her hesitation told him everything he needed to know even before she answered. "Yes," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's my son." The implication hit Blake like a physical blow. 6 years, if the boy was around that age then. "How old is he?" Blake asked, unable to keep the intensity from his voice. Olivia stood abruptly, pulling Noah up with her. The boy was watching the exchange with curious eyes, seemingly recovered from his near drowning. "Thank you for saving him," she said, ignoring his question completely. "But we need to go now." She turned away, holding Noah's hand tightly as they began walking up the beach toward the row of summer homes that lined the dunes. "Olivia, wait!" Blake called, scrambling to his feet. She quickened her pace, leaning down to whisper something to Noah, who glanced back at Blake with those unsettlingly familiar eyes. Blake caught up to them in a few long strides, gently but firmly catching Olivia's arm. "I'm not letting you walk away. Not again," he said, his voice low enough that Noah couldn't hear. "Not until you tell me the truth." Olivia's face hardened. "The truth? You want to talk about truth after everything your family did?" "What are you talking about?" Blake asked, genuine confusion crossing his features. "Like you don't know," she scoffed, pulling her arm. "Free. Noah, honey, go wait by the stairs. I'll be right there." The boy looked uncertainly between them before reluctantly walking a short distance away. Once he was out of earshot, Olivia turned back to Blake, her expression a mixture of pain and fury. "Your family made it very clear what would happen if I didn't disappear from your life," she hissed. "The threats, the private investigators following me, the job offers mysteriously disappearing once they learned my name, your father's lawyers with their NDAs and settlement offers." Blake's blood ran cold. "I never knew about any of that." "Right," Olivia said, disbelief evident in her tone. "Just like you never knew about the pregnancy test I took the day before you suddenly ended things. Just like you never got any of my calls or messages." "I didn't end things," Blake insisted, his mind reeling. "You're the one who disappeared without a word. I looked for you for months." Something in his expression must have reached her, because Olivia's certainty wavered for the first time. "You really don't know, do you?" she asked, studying his face. "The pictures your brother showed me of you with that model in Milan, the engagement announcement your father's PR team had ready to release?" Blake shook his head, stunned into silence as pieces began falling into place. His family's sudden insistence that he take over the European offices, the mystery woman they kept trying to introduce him to, his brother Richard's smug satisfaction. When Blake finally stopped mentioning Olivia's name. "Is he mine?" Blake asked, his voice breaking slightly as he glanced at Noah, who was drawing patterns in the sand with a stick. Olivia's silence was all the confirmation he needed. "I have a right to know my son," he said softly, fighting to keep his emotions in check. "And he has a right to know his father." "It's not that simple," Olivia replied, her anger now mingled with uncertainty. "He's happy, we're happy. I've built a life for us that doesn't need Kingsley money or Kingsley problems." "I'm not talking about money," Blake said firmly. "I'm talking about time. 6 years, Olivia. 6 years I can never get back." Before she could respond, Noah called out from the stairs. "Mom, can we go home now? I'm cold." Olivia looked torn, her eyes darting between Blake and her son, their son. "This isn't over," Blake told her quietly. "I won't force my way into his life, but I'm not walking away either. Not this time." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her reluctant hand. "My personal number is on the back. Call me when you're ready to talk." With that, he turned and walked away, his mind spinning with revelations and possibilities, leaving Olivia standing on the beach with his card clutched in her trembling fingers and their son waiting patiently nearby. Blake didn't sleep that night. How could he? The discovery that he had a son, a boy who had almost slipped away from him twice now, left him restless and filled with a volatile mixture of joy, rage, and determination. By dawn, he was in his study at the Hamptons house, laptop, open, phone in hand. As CEO of the East Coast operations of Kingsley Investment Group, he had resources at his disposal. Not that he needed them to remember Olivia's full name, Olivia Marie Reed, the name he had once imagined sharing with her. A quick search revealed she now went by Olivia Mason. So she had married. The thought sent an irrational pang of jealousy through him until further searching showed a marriage license and divorce decree all within a year's time. Mason had been her married name, but she had kept it after the divorce. More importantly, he found that Olivia now owned a small but successful art gallery in Southampton, just a few miles from where they had met on the beach. Reed Mason Gallery. The irony wasn't lost on him. She had built her dream within walking distance of his family's summer home. Blake stared at the gallery website, taking in photographs of the bright, airy space filled with contemporary artwork. According to the About page, Olivia specialized in showcasing emerging New York artists. There was no mention of a son, no personal details at all. She had always been private that way. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The screen displayed Richard Kingsley, his older brother and the current CFO of the family business. Blake hesitated before answering. "Richard, it's early." "Not in London," his brother replied smoothly. "Just checking in on how the solitude is treating you. Father was concerned when you suddenly decided to take a personal week." Blake doubted that very much. William Kingsley, their father and the patriarch of the family empire, rarely concerned himself with his son's whereabouts unless it affected the company stock price. "I'm fine. Just needed some time to think," Blake said carefully. After the revelations of the previous day, he wasn't ready to trust anyone in his family, not until he knew the full truth. Think about what? The Davis merger? Because honestly, Blake, that's a done deal, regardless of your reservations about their labor practices. Blake ignored the bait. "Actually, I ran into someone yesterday, someone from my past." The silence on the other end of the line stretched a beat too long. "Oh? Anyone I know?" Richard finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Olivia Reed." This time, the silence was unmistakable. When Richard spoke again, his voice had cooled several degrees. "That's unexpected. I thought she left New York years ago." "Apparently not," Blake replied, watching his brother's reaction closely despite the physical distance between them. "Funny thing is, she seems to think our family had something to do with our breakup. Women like that always want to blame someone else," Richard dismissed with a forced chuckle. "Especially when they set their sights on someone of your financial standing and fail to close the deal." The casual cruelty in his brother's words made Blake's fingers tighten around the phone. "She also had a son with her," he continued, keeping his voice steady. "About 6 years old." The extended silence that followed told Blake everything he needed to know. "You knew," he said quietly. "You all knew." "Blake, listen." "No, you listen." Blake cut him off, cold fury building in his chest. "I want to know exactly what happened 6 years ago. What did you do? What did Father do?" Richard sighed, the sound tinny through the phone speaker. "It was for your own good. You were making a mistake." "That wasn't your decision to make." Blake's fist came down hard on his desk, causing his laptop to jump. "I had a right to know she was pregnant." "Did she tell you that?" Richard's voice sharpened. "Because if she's suddenly claiming the child is yours after all this time, I'd be very careful. She's obviously after the Kingsley fortune." "Stop." Blake interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "I want you to call Father and tell him we're having a family meeting. Tonight. At the Manhattan House. I'll be there at 7. Blake, be reasonable." 7 o'clock, Richard. "And if either of you thinks about not showing up, remember that as CEO of the East Coast Division, I have access to every document, every email, every transaction the company has made in the last decade, including any payoffs or threats made to Olivia Reed 6 years ago." Without waiting for a response, Blake ended the call and tossed his phone onto the desk. His next move was clear. He needed to see Olivia again, needed to understand exactly what had happened, and most importantly, he needed to know his son. The Reed Mason Gallery was housed in a renovated Victorian building just off Southampton's main street. Large windows allowed natural light to flood the space, illuminating the colorful abstract paintings that adorned the white walls. When Blake pushed open the door, a small bell chimed overhead. The gallery was empty of visitors, but a young woman with purple-streaked hair looked up from behind a sleek reception desk. "Welcome to Reed Mason," she greeted brightly. "Are you interested in a particular artist?" "I'm looking for Olivia," Blake replied, scanning the open space. "Do you have an appointment? Ms. Mason only meets with clients by—" "It's all right, Zoe." Olivia's voice came from a doorway at the back of the gallery. She stood there, arms crossed protectively over her chest, wearing a simple black dress that contrasted with the vibrant artwork surrounding her. "I've been expecting Mr. Kingsley." The receptionist looked between them with obvious curiosity before nodding. "I'll be out front if you need anything." Once Zoe had disappeared, Olivia gestured toward her office. "We can talk privately in here." The office was small but elegant, with a desk facing a window that overlooked a courtyard garden. Framed drawings hung on one wall, childish scribbles that had been professionally matted and framed with the same care as the valuable artwork in the main gallery. "Noah's?" Blake asked, nodding toward the drawings. Olivia nodded, closing the door behind them. "He has an artist's eye." "Like his mother," Blake said softly. She didn't respond to that, instead moving to sit behind her desk, putting a physical barrier between them. Blake remained standing, too restless to sit. "I'm surprised you came here," Olivia finally said. "I thought you'd send a lawyer." "Is that what you expected from me?" Blake asked, hurt by the assumption. "To handle my own son through legal proxies?" "It's what your father would do." She met his gaze directly. "And despite everything, the apple never falls far from the tree in families like yours." "I'm not my father," Blake said firmly. "I never wanted to be." Something in his expression must have reached her because her posture softened slightly. "No," she admitted. "You weren't. At least, not the Blake I knew." "I'm still that person, Olivia." He moved closer to her desk. "The person who loved you. The person who would have wanted to know about his child." Olivia's fingers tapped nervously on her desk blotter. "Where do we go from here, then? You can't just walk into Noah's life and announce you're his father. He thinks his father was a man I met after college who wasn't ready for a family." The lie stung, but Blake understood the necessity of it. "I'm not going to disrupt his life," he promised, "but I want a chance to know him, and I want him to know me, when the time is right." "And what does that look like exactly?" Olivia asked, skepticism evident in her tone. "Weekend visits to your penthouse? Holidays with the Kingsley family who worked so hard to keep me away from you?" "I'm meeting with my family tonight," Blake told her. "I intend to get the full truth about what happened 6 years ago. Whatever they did, I had no part in it. You have to believe that." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "I want to," she finally said. "But they showed me pictures, Blake. You with other women. The engagement announcement they were planning to release." "All lies," Blake insisted. "I never moved on, Olivia. Not really." A flush crept into her cheeks, and she looked away. "It doesn't matter now. That was a lifetime ago. We both have different lives. But we have one very important connection," Blake reminded her gently. "And I missed 6 years of his life already. I don't want to miss any more." Before Olivia could respond, the office door burst open and Noah bounded in, followed by a flustered-looking Zoe. "Mom, I finished my math homework and—" The boy stopped short when he saw Blake, his eyes widening in recognition. "Hey, you're the swimming man from the beach." Seeing Noah in the bright light of day, the resemblance to Blake was even more striking. He had Olivia's smile and nose, but everything else, from the set of his eyes to the way he carried himself, was pure Kingsley. "Sorry, Miss Mason," Zoe apologized. "He ran in before I could stop him." "It's all right," Olivia said, her eyes never leaving the tableau of father and son, facing each other for the first time with awareness. "Noah, this is Mr. Kingsley. He's an old friend of mine." "You saved me from the big waves," Noah said, studying Blake with open curiosity. "Mom said I could have been swept away if you hadn't helped." Blake crouched down to the boy's eye level, his heart hammering in his chest. "I'm glad I was there," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "It was very brave of you to stay calm in the water." Noah beamed at the praise. "Mom signed me up for swimming lessons starting next week, so next time I'll be able to save myself." "That's great," Blake smiled. "Swimming is an important skill." Olivia cleared her throat. "Noah, why don't you show Zoe that new sketch you were working on? Mr. Kingsley and I need to finish our conversation." "Okay," Noah agreed, but lingered a moment longer, studying Blake's face. "You know what's weird? Your eyes are the same color as mine. Mom says I got my eyes from my dad." With that innocent observation, he darted out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. When the door closed behind him, Blake turned back to Olivia. "He's incredible," he said softly. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "He is, and I've protected him his entire life. I won't let anyone hurt him, Blake, not even you." "I would never hurt him," Blake vowed. "Or you," Not again. Whatever it takes, I'm going to make this right." As he spoke, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from his father. "Richard tells me you're making reckless accusations. The girl has resurfaced, I take it. Be at the house at 7. This needs to be handled properly." Blake's jaw tightened as he read the message. Handled properly. His father's favorite phrase when dealing with inconvenient truths. "I have to go," he told Olivia, pocketing his phone. "But this isn't over. I meant what I said. I want to be part of Noah's life." "First, find out the truth," Olivia replied quietly. "Then we'll talk about where we go from here." As Blake left the gallery, his resolve hardened. One way or another, he would uncover what his family had done 6 years ago. And nothing, not his father's power, not his brother's manipulation, would keep him from his son again. The Kingsley family mansion on Fifth Avenue stood as a monument to old money and power. 6 stories of limestone and marble, it had been in the family for 4 generations, witnessing the rise of the Kingsley fortune from railroad investments to the diversified financial empire it represented today. Blake had always felt uncomfortable in the cavernous halls, with their austere portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Tonight, as he strode through the grand entrance, that discomfort had transformed into cold determination. The butler, Jenkins, appeared silently to take his coat. "Mr. William and Mr. Richard are waiting in the study, sir." "Thank you, Jenkins," Blake replied, straightening his tie. He had changed into a tailored charcoal suit, armor for the confrontation ahead. The study door was closed, but Blake could hear the murmur of voices behind it. Taking a deep breath, he pushed it open without knocking. His father sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, looking every bit the titan of industry with his silver hair and penetrating gaze. At 72, William Kingsley had lost none of his commanding presence. Richard stood by the window, drink in hand, his expression carefully neutral when Blake entered. "Blake," his father acknowledged with a curt nod. "Richard tells me you've been making some concerning allegations." "Not allegations," Blake corrected, remaining standing despite the empty chair across from his father's desk. "Questions about what happened 6 years ago with Olivia Reed." William's expression didn't change. "Ancient history. I believe you're allowing nostalgia to cloud your judgment." "Nostalgia," Blake repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Is that what we're calling it when I discover I have a 6-year-old son I knew nothing about?" His father's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that the news had any impact on him. "You can't be certain the boy is yours," Richard interjected smoothly. "Women in her position often make such claims when they see an opportunity." "Her position?" Blake challenged, turning to his brother. "You mean the position of having her life systematically dismantled by the Kingsley family? Because that's what happened, isn't it? That's what the two of you arranged." William sighed, leaning back in his leather chair. "Blake, you were 26. Years old with a promising future ahead of you. Ms. Reed was a waitress with an art degree and no prospects. It was a summer infatuation, nothing more." "Don't diminish what we had," Blake warned, his voice low. "I loved her. I was planning to propose to her that Christmas." Richard laughed outright at this. "With grandmother's ring, no doubt. How romantic." "Enough, Richard." William silenced his eldest son with a look before turning back to Blake. "Whatever you believed you felt for this woman, she was not suitable for someone in your position. The board would never have accepted the marriage, and your future at the company would have been compromised. So instead of letting me make my own choice, you made it for me," Blake said, the pieces finally falling into place. "What exactly did you do?" A heavy silence filled the study. Richard looked to their father, who seemed to be calculating his response carefully. "We protected the family interests," William finally said, "including yours." "Tell me everything," Blake demanded. "Now." William exchanged a glance with Richard. Before reaching into his desk drawer, he withdrew a thick folder and placed it on the desk. "The private investigator's reports," he explained dispassionately. "We had Ms. Reed thoroughly vetted when it became clear your attachment to her was becoming serious." Blake's jaw clenched as he picked up the folder. Inside were surveillance photos of Olivia, leaving her apartment, working at the marina, even meeting Blake for dinner. The invasion of privacy made his stomach turn. "You had her followed?" "Standard procedure," Richard said from his position by the window. "We do the same for all potential business partners." "She wasn't a business partner," Blake snapped. "She was the woman I loved." "She was a liability," William corrected. "One phone call from Ms. Reed's mother confirmed our suspicions. The woman practically salivated at the mention of a potential settlement." Blake froze. "You contacted her mother?" "We offered Mrs. Reed a considerable sum to encourage her daughter to end the relationship," William said calmly. "She was quite receptive." The revelation hit Blake like a physical blow. Olivia had been estranged from her mother, a woman whose gambling addiction had drained the family's modest savings and forced Olivia to work multiple jobs through college. "Olivia wouldn't have taken money," Blake said with certainty. "No, she didn't," William admitted, "which is why more direct measures became necessary." The photos, Blake realized, remembering what Olivia had told him, the engagement announcement. Richard had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable as their father continued. "The board was pressuring me to announce your ascension to the European division," William explained. The story needed the right framing, the young executive becoming engaged to a suitable partner before taking his place on the international stage. "So you created a fictional engagement," Blake concluded, disgust evident in his voice. "With whom?" "Caroline." "Davis," Richard supplied. "Her father was eager to create a connection between our families before the merger." "I barely knew Caroline," Blake protested. "We met twice at charity functions." "She was amenable to the arrangement," William shrugged, "and quite photogenic." "The pictures were staged," Richard added, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Professional models who resembled you enough to convince an emotional young woman that you had moved on." The calculated cruelty of it all left Blake momentarily speechless. They had systematically destroyed his relationship with Olivia, all while he was working 100-hour weeks at their behest, preparing for the European assignment. "And the pregnancy test?" he finally asked. "Did you know about that too?" A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his father's face, but Richard's expression revealed everything Blake needed to know. "You knew," Blake said, turning to his brother. "She told you she was pregnant, didn't she?" Richard drained his glass before answering. "She came to the office the day after you left for London, said she needed to speak with you urgently. I told her you were already gone." And she broke down, told me about the pregnancy test, begged me to give her your contact information in London." Richard set his empty glass down with deliberate care. "I convinced her it would be better for everyone if she moved on with her life." "Better for everyone," Blake repeated, incredulous. "Or better for you?" Richard's expression hardened. "For the family, for the company. You were in no position to become a father, especially not with a woman like her." "A woman like her," Blake echoed, contempt dripping from every word. "You mean an honest, talented, loving woman who wanted nothing from me but my love in return, as opposed to the social climbing debutantes you and father kept throwing in my path." "Your naivety was always your weakness," William cut in. "The world doesn't work on love, Blake. It works on power, connections, and strategic alliances." "So what did you offer her?" Blake demanded, turning back to his brother. "To disappear from my life and raise my child alone?" Richard hesitated, glancing at their father. "Answer me." Blake slammed his hand on the desk, causing the crystal decanter to rattle. $5 million and a non-disclosure agreement," Richard finally admitted, "plus the promise that she would never have to worry about her child's education or health care." "Which she refused," William added, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "Of course she refused," Blake said. "Olivia would never sell our child's birthright." "No," Richard agreed, "but she was persuaded by other means." A chill ran down Blake's spine. "What did you do?" "Nothing illegal," Richard assured him quickly. "Simply pointed out that a protracted custody battle with the Kingsley family would drain her emotionally and financially, that the narrative could easily become one of a gold digger trying to trap a wealthy heir, which would follow both her and the child forever." "You threatened her," Blake translated, his voice deadly quiet. "You made her believe I wanted nothing to do with her or my child." We made her understand the reality of the situation, Richard corrected, and ensured she had the means to support herself and the child without the Kingsley name. The gallery, Blake realized. That was you? William nodded. An anonymous investor provided the initial capital. Ms. Reed has actually made it quite successful, I understand. She has talent, I'll grant her that much. Blake felt sick. While he had been searching for Olivia, heartbroken and confused, his own family had been orchestrating the entire situation from the shadows. 6 years, he said quietly. You stole 6 years I can never get back with my son. We gave you what you needed most, time to mature into your role without unnecessary complications, William replied, unmoved. The boy has been well provided for, even if indirectly. His name is Noah, Blake said, his voice rising. Not the boy, he's your grandson, though God knows you don't deserve that title. William's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes at the mention of a grandson. After a moment, he asked, "Does he have the Kingsley look?" The question, so unexpected in its vulnerability, momentarily threw Blake off balance. "Yes," he admitted, "he has our eyes, my chin, your stubborn expression when he's thinking." For a brief moment, William Kingsley looked his age, an old man confronting the consequences of his actions. But the moment passed quickly, his features hardening once more into the mask of control he had perfected over decades. "What do you intend to do now?" he asked pragmatically. "I'm going to be part of my son's life," Blake stated firmly. "With or without your approval." "And the woman?" Richard asked. "Olivia?" Blake met his brother's gaze steadily. "That's between her and me, but let me make one thing crystal clear. If either of you ever interferes in my personal life again, I will walk away from this company and take every client relationship I've built with me." William's eyes narrowed at the threat. "You would, jeopardize your inheritance over this?" "In a heartbeat," Blake confirmed without hesitation. "Noah is my priority now. Not the Kingsley legacy, not the family fortune, my son." Richard laughed humorlessly. "You sound just like Uncle Thomas, and we all know how that turned out." The comparison to their father's younger brother, the family, black sheep who had abdicated his position in the company to marry a French ballet dancer, was clearly meant to sting. Instead, Blake felt a surprising kinship with the uncle he barely remembered. "Maybe Uncle Thomas had it right all along," Blake replied quietly. William studied his younger son with shrewd eyes. "You've made your point, Blake. No one will interfere with your reconciliation efforts." "That's not enough," Blake said firmly. "I want your word that Olivia and Noah will be welcomed into this family with the respect they deserve. No more threats, no more manipulation, no more anonymous investors pulling strings behind the scenes." William and Richard exchanged looks, conducting a silent negotiation that had become second nature after decades of business dealings together. "Very well," William finally conceded, "but I expect discretion. The board doesn't need to know the details of this situation until you've established a formal relationship with the boy." "His name is Noah," Blake repeated firmly, "and I'll handle this my way, not yours." With that, he turned and walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Without looking back, he added, "I'm taking a leave of absence from the company. Effective immediately. Chad Reynolds can handle my responsibilities temporarily." "For how long?" William demanded, alarm evident in his voice for the first time. "As long as it takes," Blake replied, finally turning to face his father and brother one last time. "I've missed 6 years with my son. I won't miss a day more because of Kingsley business." As he closed the door behind him, Blake felt lighter than he had in years. The truth, no matter how painful, had finally set him free from the web of lies his family had woven around him. Now he could focus on what truly mattered, building a relationship with Olivia and their son. The following week passed in a blur for Blake. After years of devoting every waking hour to the Kingsley Investment Group, the sudden absence of meetings, calls and endless emails left him with an unfamiliar sense of freedom. For the first time in his adult life, he was making decisions based solely on what he wanted, not what was expected of him. He'd rented a modest beachfront cottage in Southampton, just a few miles from Olivia's home. The Hamptons mansion held Too many Kingsley associations, and he wanted neutral ground, a fresh start. Blake stood on the deck of his new temporary home, watching the waves crash against the shore. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Olivia's name flashed on the screen, sending a jolt of nervous anticipation through him. "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice casual. "Blake, it's me." Her voice still affected him even after all these years. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I think it's time for Noah to meet you, properly, I mean." Blake's heart raced. "I'd like that. Very much." "He has a baseball game tomorrow afternoon," Olivia continued. "Little League. He pitches. Maybe you could come watch, and afterward we could all get ice cream or something casual." "That sounds perfect," Blake replied, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "Just tell me when and where." After she gave him the details, a brief silence fell between them. "Blake," she finally said, her voice softer now, "what did your family say about everything?" He hesitated, unsure how much to share. "They admitted it all," he said finally. "The manipulation, the lies, everything. I've taken a leave of absence from the company, indefinitely." "You did?" The surprise in her voice was evident. "But your career—" "Doesn't matter," Blake interrupted gently. "Not compared to this. I've missed too much already, Olivia. I won't miss any more." Another pause, longer this time. "Noah's excited about meeting you," she admitted. "I told him you're an old friend who's moved back to town and wants to catch up." "Thank you," Blake said sincerely, "for giving me this chance. I know it can't be easy to trust me again." "I'm not sure I do. Trust you, I mean," Olivia replied with characteristic honesty. "But Noah deserves to know his father, and you deserve to know your son." After they hung up, Blake spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation. He found himself researching Little League baseball rules, wanting to understand the game Noah loved. He even drove to the local sporting goods store and bought a proper glove, just in case. The Southampton Community Park was bustling with activity when Blake arrived the next afternoon. Parents clustered around the bleachers, cheering on their children, as two teams of 8-year-olds faced off on the baseball diamond. It took him a moment to spot Noah on the pitcher's mound, his small frame somehow commanding in the oversized team jersey. Blake's chest tightened with pride as he watched his son wind up and throw a surprisingly fast pitch. "Strike two," the umpire called. Blake scanned the crowd until he found Olivia sitting in the bleachers, clapping enthusiastically. She wore jeans and a simple blue blouse, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she spotted him, she offered a tentative smile and patted the empty space beside her. "He's good," Blake commented as he sat down, nodding toward Noah. "He loves it," Olivia replied. "Started playing when he was 5 and insisted on being a pitcher because it's the most important position." Blake chuckled, a Kingsley through and through, always wanting to be in control of the situation. To his relief, Olivia smiled at that. "He gets that stubborn streak, honestly. That's for sure." They watched in comfortable silence as Noah struck out the batter and his teammates erupted in cheers. "How much does he know?" Blake asked quietly as Noah jogged off the field. "About me, I mean." Olivia kept her eyes on the game. "Just that. His father and I were young when we met, and that circumstances kept us apart. I've never spoken badly of you," she added, glancing at him. "I couldn't bring myself to do that, even when I thought you'd abandoned us." The admission touched Blake deeply. "Thank you for that. I always planned to tell him the full truth when he was older," Olivia continued. "I just never imagined you'd actually be here for that conversation." Before Blake could respond, Noah's team scored a run, and they both stood to cheer. Blake caught himself mimicking Olivia's movements, not wanting to seem out of place in this world they had built without him. The game ended with Noah's team winning by 2 runs. The children scattered from the field, racing toward waiting parents, with flushed faces and excited chatter. Noah spotted them and ran over, his baseball cap askew on his head. "Mom, did you see that last pitch? Coach says I'm getting better at my curveball." "I did see. It was amazing," Olivia beamed, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Noah, you remember Mr. Kingsley, don't you?" Noah looked up at Blake, recognition dawning in his eyes. "The swimming man, you came to watch my game?" Blake knelt down to Noah's level, his heart hammering in his chest. "I did. Your mom told me what a great pitcher you are, and she was right. That last strikeout was impressive." Noah's face lit up with the praise. "Do you like baseball too?" "Do," Blake replied, grateful for the hours he'd spent researching the night before. "I played shortstop when I was about your age, though I wasn't nearly as good as you are." "Really?" Noah's eyes widened with interest. "I could show you my baseball card collection if you want. I have all the Yankees." Blake glanced at Olivia, who nodded her permission with a small smile. "I'd like that very much." "We were thinking of getting ice cream to celebrate your win," Olivia told Noah. "Would that be okay?" "Yes," Noah exclaimed, pumping his fist in the air. "Can I get chocolate chip cookie dough with sprinkles?" "I think that can be arranged," Blake laughed, surprised at how natural this felt, talking with his son, making plans as if they'd done this 100 times before. As they walked to the parking lot, Noah between them, Blake caught Olivia's eye over their son's head. The guarded expression she had worn for days had softened somewhat, replaced by a cautious warmth that gave him hope. The local ice cream parlor was crowded with families, the cheerful atmosphere a perfect backdrop for their first outing together. Noah chatted animatedly between bites of his elaborate ice cream creation, moving seamlessly from baseball statistics to his school science project to his best friend's new puppy. Blake absorbed every word, cataloging these precious details about his son's life. Noah was bright and articulate, with a quick wit that reminded Blake of Olivia, and a quiet confidence that, he had to admit, resembled his own. "So you work with money?" Noah asked, tilting his head curiously after Blake mentioned something about his job. "I did," Blake nodded. "My family has a company that helps people invest their money." "Like the stock market?" Noah asked. "We learned about that in school. My teacher says it's like gambling but with fancier clothes." He giggled at his own joke. Blake laughed. "Your teacher might be onto something there, but I'm taking a break from work right now." "How come?" Noah asked, with a child's direct curiosity. Blake glanced at Olivia before answering carefully. "I realized there were more important things I wanted to focus on." "Like what?" Noah pressed. "Like getting to know the people who matter," Blake replied softly, meeting his son's inquisitive gaze. "So like his own." Something in his tone must have registered with Noah, who studied Blake with surprising intensity for a moment, before nodding, seemingly satisfied with the answer. When they finished their ice cream, Noah spotted a comic book store across the street and begged to check it out. "Just for a few minutes," Olivia agreed, checking her watch. "Then we need to head home for dinner." As Noah darted toward the shop, Olivia hung back with Blake. "You're good with him," she observed quietly. "Natural." "He makes it easy," Blake replied. "He's amazing, Olivia. You've done an incredible job raising him." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "To us," Blake corrected gently. Olivia's expression grew serious. "Blake, I need to know something. Is this real? Are you really prepared to be a father? Because Noah has never had a consistent male figure in his life, and I can't let him get attached to you just to have you disappear when you get bored, or when your family pressures you to return to the company." "I understand your concern," Blake said earnestly, "but I need you to understand something too. The moment I saw him on that beach, even before I knew he was mine, something changed in me. And now that I know the truth, nothing could make me walk away. Not the company, not my family, nothing." She studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. "And what about us?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where do I fit into this new life you're creating?" The Psalm question caught Blake off guard. He had been so focused on establishing a relationship with Noah that he hadn't allowed himself to hope for more with Olivia. "That depends on you," he said honestly. "I never stopped loving you, Olivia, but I know I hurt you, even if it wasn't intentional. I know you've built a life without me. If friendship is all you can offer right now, I'll respect that." Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. 6 years is a long time, Blake. We're different people now. I know, he acknowledged, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we're better people than we were before. Before she could respond, Noah burst out of the comic shop, clutching a new comic book and beaming with excitement. Mom, they had the new Spider-Man issue I've been looking for. The moment between them broken, Olivia quickly wiped her eyes and turned to their son with a bright smile. That's great, honey. Did you thank Mr. Kingsley for the ice cream? Thank you for the ice cream, Mr. Kingsley, Noah said dutifully, then hesitated. What should I call you? Mr. Kingsley sounds so formal, and Mom says you're going to be around more now. Blake's heart skipped a beat at the innocent question. He looked to Olivia for guidance. You can call me Blake for now, he suggested gently, crouching down to Noah's level. Is that okay with you? Noah considered this for a moment, then nodded. Blake, he tested the name. Okay, Blake, would you like to come over sometime and play catch? I could show you my curveball technique. Blake swallowed the lump in his throat. I would love that more than anything. As they walked back to their cars, Noah ran ahead, engrossed in his new comic book. Blake and Olivia followed a few steps behind. I meant what I said, Blake told her quietly. I'm all in, Olivia. For Noah, for you, for whatever you're willing to share with me. Olivia was silent for a long moment before speaking. One day at a time, okay? For now, let's focus on Noah. One day at a time, Blake agreed, hope blooming in his chest despite her caution. What he didn't know was that their carefully constructed peace was about to be shattered, because even as they took these first tentative steps toward becoming a family, someone was watching from the shadows, someone who saw Noah not as a beloved child, but as a threat to everything he had planned. Over the next few weeks, Blake became a fixture in Noah's life. Baseball practices, weekend trips to the museum, helping with homework. He embraced fatherhood with a dedication that surprised even himself. Though they had yet to tell Noah the truth about their relationship, the bond between father and son grew stronger each day. Olivia watched this transformation with mixed emotions. On one hand, seeing the joy on Noah's face when Blake appeared filled her with happiness. On the other, she couldn't ignore the nagging fear that it could all disappear again. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Blake and Olivia sat on her back porch, sharing a bottle of wine as the sun set over her small but beautifully landscaped garden. He asked about you again today, Olivia said, swirling the red wine in her glass. Why you're spending so much time with us? Blake set his glass down carefully. What did you tell him? That we're friends, she replied. But he's smart, Blake. He knows there's more to it. Blake nodded, watching the shifting colors of the sunset. I think it's time we told him the truth, don't you? Olivia sighed, a sound caught between relief and apprehension. I do, but I'm scared. Of what? Blake asked gently. That he'll be angry with me for keeping you from him. That he'll be confused or hurt. She met his gaze directly. That you'll tell him, and then something will happen and you'll be gone again. Blake reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. Not ever again. She didn't pull away, and Blake took that as a good sign. They had been dancing around their feelings for weeks now, rebuilding trust one careful step at a time. There's something else we need to discuss, Blake continued. Richard called me yesterday. Olivia tensed. What did he want? To warn me, actually, Blake replied, his expression darkening. Apparently, the board is getting nervous about my extended absence. My father has been suggesting that I might be mentally unfit to retain my position. Can he do that? Olivia asked, alarmed. He can try, Blake shrugged. But I've already spoken with my lawyers. My voting shares can't be touched, regardless of my employment status. Olivia studied him for a moment. You don't seem concerned. I'm not, Blake admitted. Not about the company, anyway. But I'm concerned about what it means, which is that my father isn't ready to accept defeat, Blake said grimly. He sees Noah as a threat to his carefully constructed dynasty, and William Kingsley doesn't tolerate threats. A shiver ran down Olivia's spine despite the warm evening. What are you saying, Blake? Just that we need to be careful, he assured her, squeezing her hand. I've increased security at my place, and I think we should do the same here. Olivia started to protest, but stopped short when she saw the seriousness in Blake's eyes. Okay, she agreed quietly. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, replaced by the soft glow of the garden lights. Do you ever think about what might have happened? Olivia asked suddenly. If your family hadn't interfered? Blake's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. Every day. And? She prompted. And I think we would have been happy, he said simply. I think I would have asked you to marry me, and you would have said yes, and we would have raised Noah together from the beginning. Olivia's eyes glistened in the dim light. I would have said yes, she whispered. Blake's heart raced at her admission. It's not too late, you know, he said softly, for us to be a family, a real one. Before Olivia could respond, the back door opened and Noah appeared in his pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mom, I had a bad dream, he mumbled, then brightened when he spotted Blake. You're still here. Hey, buddy, Blake smiled, releasing Olivia's hand as Noah came to stand between them. Want to talk about that dream? Noah shook his head, leaning against his mother's shoulder. It was just scary. There was a man trying to take me away. Blake and Olivia exchanged concerned glances over Noah's head. No one's going to take you anywhere, Blake assured him firmly. I promise. Noah looked up at him with trusting eyes. Pinky promise? Blake solemnly extended his pinky finger, hooking it with Noah's much smaller one. Pinky promise. Olivia brushed Noah's hair back from his forehead. Let's get you back. To bed, sweetie. Can Blake tuck me in? Noah asked sleepily. The simple request made Blake's throat tighten with emotion. I'd be honored, he managed. As Blake carried a half-asleep Noah back to his bedroom, Olivia watched them go, her heart full. Perhaps it was time to stop letting fear dictate their future. The next morning, Olivia woke to the sound of her cell phone buzzing insistently on her nightstand. The caller ID displayed Blake, and a glance at the clock showed it was barely 6 a.m. Blake, what's wrong? She answered, immediately alert. Nothing's wrong, he assured her quickly. But I need you and Noah to meet me at the beach house as soon as possible. There's something important we need to discuss. At 6 in the morning? Olivia questioned, puzzled by the urgency in his voice. Trust me, Blake said, and something in his tone convinced her. And Olivia, pack an overnight bag for both of you, just in case. An hour later, Olivia pulled her car into the driveway of Blake's rented beach cottage. Noah was still drowsy in the back seat, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Blake met them at the door, looking both nervous and excited. Thank you for coming, he said, ushering them inside. The cottage was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes. On the dining table, Olivia noticed 3 airline tickets. Blake, what's going on? She asked, a mixture of confusion and apprehension in her voice. Breakfast first, he insisted with a smile. Then we'll talk. Over blueberry pancakes and orange juice, Blake kept the conversation light, asking Noah about his upcoming Little League Championship game and his science project. But Olivia could tell something significant was brewing beneath the surface. After breakfast, as Noah explored the toy box Blake had thoughtfully prepared for him in the living room, Blake led Olivia onto the deck overlooking the ocean. Okay, enough mystery, Olivia said firmly. What's this all about? And what are those plane tickets for? Blake took a deep breath. I had another visit from Richard last night. It wasn't pleasant. Olivia's stomach dropped. What happened? He made it clear that my father has no intention of accepting Noah as a Kingsley heir, Blake explained, his jaw tightening at the memory. He suggested that if I persist in this paternity charade, as he called it, they would be forced to take drastic measures. What does that mean? Olivia asked, fear creeping into her voice. It means my father is desperate, Blake replied. He's built his entire legacy on controlling everything and everyone around him. Her grandson he didn't approve of, raised outside his influence, threatens that control. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm morning. So, the tickets are for us to get away for a while, Blake confirmed. My family's summer home in Martha's Vineyard. It's secluded, secure, and most importantly, held in a trust they can't touch. It will give us time to figure out our next steps without looking over our shoulders. You want us to run away? Olivia asked incredulously. No, Blake shook, his head firmly. I want us to regroup, to spend time together as a family without interference. And, he added, reaching into his pocket, I want to do something I should have done 6 years ago. Olivia's breath caught as he withdrew a small velvet box. Blake, she whispered, her eyes wide. I'm not running, Olivia, he said solemnly, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. I'm standing my ground for Noah, for you, for us. He knelt before her on the sun-warmed deck. I know it's fast, he acknowledged, and I know we have a lot to figure out. But I've loved you for 6 years without you, and I don't want to spend another day wondering what might have been. Marry me, Olivia. Let's be the family we were always meant to be. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks as she stared at the man before her, the father of her child, the love she had never truly forgotten. Blake, Mom? Noah's voice interrupted from the doorway. Why are you crying? Is Blake making you sad? They both turned to see Noah watching them with concerned eyes, his dinosaur clutched protectively to his chest. Blake smiled reassuringly. No, buddy, sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. Noah approached them cautiously. Are you happy, Mum? Olivia wiped her tears, looking between her son and the man still kneeling before her. Yes, she said softly. I think I am. Noah noticed the ring box then, his eyes widening. Is that what I think it is? Like when Prince Charming asks the princess to marry him? Blake laughed. Something like that. Actually, Noah, there's something important your mom and I need to tell you. Olivia took a deep breath, nodding her agreement. It was time. They sat Noah down between them on the porch swing, the gentle ocean breeze rustling around them. Noah, Olivia began carefully, remember how I told you that your father and I loved each other very much, but circumstances kept us apart? Noah nodded solemnly. Like Romeo and Juliet, but without the poison part. Blake barely suppressed a smile. At the comparison, the thing is, Noah, he continued, those circumstances have changed, and your father, well, he's here now. Noah looked between them, confusion written across his young features. What do you mean? Where is he? He's here, Olivia said gently, taking Blake's hand. Blake is your father, Noah. Noah went completely still, his eyes growing impossibly wide as he stared at Blake. My dad, he whispered. Blake nodded, emotion clogging his throat. I am, and I know I've missed a lot of your life, but if you'll let me, I'd like to make up for lost time. Noah was silent for what felt like an eternity, processing this revelation with a child's straightforward logic. Is that why we have the same eyes? He finally asked. And the same chin? Yes, Blake confirmed, amazed by his son's perception. That's exactly why. Noah's next question caught them both off guard. Did you not want to be my dad before? Is that why you weren't here? No, Blake said firmly, kneeling in front of Noah. I didn't know about you. If I had, nothing would have kept me away, nothing. Your father's family made some mistakes, Olivia added carefully. They kept us apart, and they kept secrets from both of us. But none of that was your fault or Blake's fault. Noah considered this, his brow furrowed in concentration. So you're my real dad, he said finally, looking at Blake. And now you want to marry Mom and be a family? Blake nodded, amazed at how simply Noah had distilled the situation. That's exactly right. How do you feel about that? Noah thought. For a moment, then asked, If you marry Mom, can I call you Dad instead of Blake? Tears welled in Blake's eyes. I would like that very much. A slow smile spread across Noah's face. Cool. I've always wanted a dad. Jimmy has one, and he teaches him cool stuff like how to throw a football and build things. I can definitely teach you those things, Blake promised, his heart overflowing with love for this remarkable child. And anything else you want to learn. Noah hopped off the swing suddenly. So did Mom say yes yet? To marrying you? Blake turned to Olivia, who was watching them both with tears in her eyes. Actually, she didn't get a chance to answer. Well? Noah prompted, hands on his hips in a perfect imitation of his mother's impatient stance. Mom, are you going to marry my dad or what? Olivia laughed through her tears, the sound like music to Blake's ears. Yes, she said softly, looking directly into Blake's eyes. Yes, I'll marry your dad. Blake slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, then pulled both Olivia and Noah into a tight embrace. For the first time in 6 years, he felt truly complete. 2 weeks later, the newly formed family was settling into life at the Martha's Vineyard estate. Noah had taken to calling Blake Dad, with an ease that melted both his parents' hearts, and the secluded beachfront property provided the perfect sanctuary for them to bond without outside interference. Blake was teaching Noah how to build a sandcastle when his phone rang. Seeing Richard's name on the display, he hesitated before answering. Yes? It's over, Blake, his brother said without preamble. Fathers had a change of heart. Blake stood, moving a few feet away from Noah to continue the conversation. What are you talking about? He wants to meet his grandson, Richard explained, a note of defeat in his voice, properly as a Kingsley. Blake was stunned. What changed? There was a long pause before Richard answered. The board voted yesterday. They're backing you, not him. And frankly, the pictures of your little family that have been appearing in the society pages haven't hurt either. The public loves a good reconciliation story. Blake had known the paparazzi had caught them at the vineyard, but he hadn't realized the impact the images would have. So this is about public perception? Typical. Maybe, Richard conceded. Or maybe he's getting old and realizing what's really important. Either way, he wants to meet Noah and Olivia without conditions. I'll discuss it with Olivia, Blake said cautiously. But no promises. That's fair, Richard replied, then added in a softer tone, For what it's worth, I'm sorry, Blake, for everything. The unexpected apology caught Blake off guard. I appreciate that, he said finally. We'll be in touch. As he hung up, Blake turned to find Olivia watching him from the porch of the beach house, her face framed by the setting sun. She had never looked more beautiful to him. Everything okay? She called. Blake smiled, looking at Noah diligently working on his sandcastle, then back at the woman who would soon be his wife. Everything is perfect, he answered truthfully. Later that night, with Noah sound asleep in his room, Blake and Olivia walked along the moonlit beach, hand in hand. So your father wants to meet Noah, Olivia mused, after Blake recounted his conversation with Richard. Do you think we should let him? Blake considered the question carefully. I think we should let Noah decide. He's wise beyond his years, that son of ours. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. He gets that from you, you know. That quiet wisdom. And his creativity from you, Blake replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. His kindness from both of us. They stopped walking, turning to face each other beneath the vast canopy of stars. We're really doing this, aren't we? Olivia asked, a smile playing at her lips. Becoming a family after all this time? We always were a family, Blake corrected gently. We just didn't know it yet. As he leaned down to kiss her, Blake knew with absolute certainty that no power on earth, not his father's manipulation, not his brother's ambition, not even 6 years of separation, could break the bonds they had forged. Because in the end, love had proven stronger than even the most carefully constructed lies. And as they walked back toward the house, toward their sleeping son and their future together, Blake silently vowed that the Kingsley legacy would mean something different from now on. Not power or control or wealth, but love and honesty and family. The true treasures that no amount of money could ever buy. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Blake and Olivia's journey to reunite their family against all odds. Their story reminds us that true love can overcome even the most challenging obstacles, and that second chances are sometimes just around the corner, waiting for us to embrace them. If you've enjoyed this emotional journey with the Kingsleys, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that explore the complexities of love, family, and forgiveness. Give this video a thumbs up if Blake's determination to be part of Noah's life touched your heart, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We've prepared a special playlist featuring similar stories of families overcoming obstacles to find their way back to each other. You'll find it by clicking the link on your left. Join us tomorrow for another captivating tale that will remind you of the power of love and resilience. Until then, remember that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come after what we thought was the end.